In this video, I'm going to show you how to use intuition to create a work of experimental design. Then I'm going to show you how to analyze the work you've just made. Why would you want to do this? Because it's a powerful way to make better work, and because the process I'm going to teach you can reveal hidden truths about yourself. This method can be used in many forms of creative process in both design and art. What's the plan for the video? I'm going to explain the process two ways. My first explanation will be for the beginner. My second explanation will go into greater depth and be more aimed at the grad student. In both explanations, I'm going to step through the creative process using diagrams. I'm also going to show you one method I use to construct my own work and how I analyze my own work to learn those hidden truths about myself. I think if you stick with this video, you might be able to use this process in your own work. You can look in the YouTube chapters below if you want to skip directly to the part most relevant to your interests. Beginner's explanation. In the creative process, many designers and artists have a sense that thinking and feeling are at odds with each other. A lot of creative people get confused or stuck and develop a kind of writer's block. Often, the source of the problem comes from the confusion over how and when to use logic or intuition in the creative process. When should I use logic? And when should I use intuition? Am I supposed to think through, plan, and analyze my work? Or should I use intuition and feel my way through the making of a piece? On one side of the creative process, we have logic, and on the other side, we have intuition. If you think too much and in the wrong ways, your work will lack life and vitality. If you feel too much and don't plan and organize, the work can be disorganized or confusing. So what's the solution? The solution to the problem is to use both. But the key is not to use them at the same time. There are different moments in the creative process where one is better than the other. Ideally, in the creative process, alternate between thinking and feeling. Put as simply as possible, think, then feel, then think. At the very beginning of a project, think clearly about the goals for the work, plan, organize, and analyze. When actually making the work, forget about the plan. Feel your way through the process. After the project is done, use clear thinking to take stock of what you've made. Analyze and assess the work, and make new plans based upon what you've learned. Let's go deeper and explain the process in greater detail and unpack the ramifications of this process. Let's define the problem. Many designers and artists find that logic and analysis can kill the creative process. Analysis is the process of breaking a complex topic like a work of art or design into smaller parts in order to gain a better understanding of the problem. Art and design schools, particularly graduate schools, focus on theory, rationality, logic, planning, and critical thinking in the creative process. This process of breaking a creative problem down into smaller and smaller parts and using critical thinking to plan the construction of work can leave the finished piece logical, but lifeless. In its worst form, analysis and logic used in the wrong ways can leave the creative practitioner creatively paralyzed. In many cases, the way artists and designers are educated lies at the root of the problem. Education, schooling, and study, if done wrong, can destroy your ability to make compelling art and design. This is why we see many artists justifiably adopt an aggressively anti-academic position. An anti-academic attitude can be a justifiable remedy to the problem of paralysis by analysis. When creatives lean on the armature of theoretical language and fancy words to prop up the work, they lose the forest for the trees. They lose the ability to see the big picture as they disappear up their own ass in a kind of wormhole of analysis. To lose the forest for the trees is to be overwhelmed by the detail to the point where the detail obscures the overall picture. We see this over and over, particularly in elite academic environments. We see designers and artists who have lost the ability to truly see their work as it is. In these environments, the emphasis on theory and logic creates a situation where the creative can't see their work aside from the language, the bullshit used to describe it. In other words, the more highly educated the creative, the more likely they are to have at their command an absolute fire hose of sophisticated language propping up the work, while the work itself looks like shit. They've lost the forest for the trees. Many street artists and self-taught artists distrust theory analysis and research and opt rather for making work exclusively by vibing. As a result, in the studio, we rarely find a powerful and productive mix of logic and reason with intuition and feeling. Logic, analysis, critical thinking about your work, while fraught with the aforementioned problems, is arguably the most powerful tool to push your work forward, to develop an understanding of how to make your work better. All this leads to the simple question of how do we resolve the tension between thinking and feeling in the studio? What follows is a plan to fix the problem. Logic and intuition shouldn't be used at the same time or in the same situations for the same ends. Most people see logic and intuition, the left and the right hemispheres of the brain, as interwoven processes. This is the problem. It can be more effective in the studio to understand logic and intuition as parallel processes, as cognitive lines running in parallel, never overlapping. Let me explain. Developing a plan for a work of art happens in a separate track to feeling your way through a piece. Too many artists and designers try to force understanding gained from reading and analysis into the work. In my beginner's explanation of this process, I stated that the solution is a modal solution. Think, then feel, then think. Repeat as many times as necessary. Number 1, have a parallel practice of research. Read and study. Think logically about art and design. Keep notes, plans, tables, insights about the field, about other artists and designers, about techniques and methods, about the problems in your work, about the ways your work falls short, about the themes and motifs present in your work. Number 2, forget about all of this. Forget about all of this research when you're actually in the process of making the work. Trust that all of this hard work in the research is a background process informing every one of your intuitive decisions. Your intuitive decisions are guided by the sum total of all of the books you've read, all of the music you've listened to, all the films you've seen, and all the research you have done. But in the actual act of creation, make no attempt to force ideas through the work. Make the work unencumbered by logic. Be logical and systematic in the research phase of the work, and be logical and systematic in the analysis of the work after it's made. The art we make can tell us a lot about ourselves. It can show us things about ourselves that we weren't aware of. Carl Jung, the Swiss psychologist who founded analytical psychology, his work has been influential in identifying